The world ended on a Tuesday morning at exactly 11:47 a.m., not with bombs or fire, but with silence. Every phone went dead, every car stopped running, every light bulb flickered out and never came back on. The Great Pulse, as people called it, later swept across the planet in minutes, frying every piece of electronic equipment mankind had built. 3 months had passed since that day, and civilization had crumbled like a house of cards in the wind. The cities that once buzzed with millions of people now stood mostly empty, their glass towers reaching toward the sky like tombstones. Those who survived had scattered into small groups, trading whatever they could find for food, water, and safety. In what used to be the busy downtown area of a once thriving city, a man named David had set up a small trading post. He wasn't much to look at, average height, graying hair, and hands that showed years of hard work. Before the collapse, he had owned a small restaurant. Now he traded canned goods, dry meat, and whatever food he could scavenge from the abandoned stores. His setup was simple: a wooden table, a few folding chairs, and a metal cart that held his precious inventory. Behind him stood the skeleton of what used to be a coffee shop, its windows long since broken out. He had turned the back room into his living space and storage area. It wasn't much, but it was his. The alien visitors had arrived 5 years before the collapse. They came in peace, they said, just wanting to learn about human culture and share knowledge. Most people had welcomed them at first. They looked almost human: 2 arms, 2 legs, a head where it should be. The main differences were their blue-tinted skin and eyes that seemed to glow softly in the dark. They called themselves the Villani. But when the world went dark, everything changed. Fear makes people do terrible things, and many humans started blaming the aliens for their troubles. Some said the Villani had caused the pulse. Others claimed they were invaders who had been planning this all along. None of it was true, but truth doesn't matter much when people are hungry and scared. The sun was setting behind the broken skyline when David first saw them approaching his stall. 2 young Villani females, walking slowly down the cracked street. Their once bright blue skin had faded to a dull gray color, and their clothes hung loose on their thin frames. Anyone could see they were starving. The tall one walked slightly ahead. She had short, dark hair and moved with the careful steps of someone trying to save energy. Her companion was smaller, with longer hair that she kept tucked behind her ears. Both of them had that hollow look in their eyes that David had seen too often lately, the look of people who hadn't eaten in days. They stopped a few feet from his table, glancing nervously at the humans who sat nearby. The other survivors gave them cold stares. One man actually got up and moved his chair away, as if being near the aliens might somehow contaminate him. The taller alien spoke first, her English broken but understandable. "Please, sir, we need food. Very hungry. No eat for days." David looked them over carefully. He had learned to be cautious in this new world. Trust could get you killed. But these didn't look dangerous. They looked desperate, which could be even worse in its own way. "What do you have to trade?" he asked, keeping his voice neutral. It was the same question he asked everyone who came to his stall. The 2 aliens exchanged glances. The smaller one whispered something in their own language. David caught a few words. He had picked up bits of Villani speech from dealing with other alien refugees. What he heard made his stomach twist. The taller one looked back at him, her glowing eyes filled with shame. We have nothing left, only." She struggled with the words, then gestured helplessly at herself and her companion. David felt sick. He understood what she was trying to say without her having to spell it out. These 2 young women were so desperate, so hungry, that they were willing to trade away their dignity just for a meal. It was the oldest and most tragic form of commerce in human history, and apparently it existed among the Villani too. For a moment, nobody spoke. The other humans at the nearby tables had gone quiet, sensing the tension. Some looked disgusted. Others seemed almost interested, which made David feel even worse. He stared at the 2 aliens for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. The smaller one had tears running down her cheeks. The taller one stood straighter, trying to maintain some dignity even while making the most humiliating offer of her life. Something about the scene reminded David of his own daughter. She had been about the same age as these two when the collapse happened. He had searched for her for weeks after the pulse. Following rumors and false leads across 3 states, he never found her. The not knowing was almost worse than if he had found a body. These 2 alien girls could have been anybody's daughters once. Before the world ended, they probably had families who loved them, dreams for the future, favorite foods and songs and movies. Now they were reduced to this, offering themselves to strangers just to survive another day. David made a decision that surprised even himself. Instead of accepting their offer or turning them away, he did something completely different. "Can you work?" he asked. The question caught them off guard. They looked at each other again, confusion replacing desperation on their faces. "Work?" The taller one repeated. "I need help running this place," David continued, the plan forming in his mind as he spoke. "Someone to help me organize inventory. Watch for trouble. Maybe help me understand which of the other alien refugees might be good to trade with in return. You get food, a place to sleep, and safety. Nothing else. Just honest work for honest pay." The transformation was immediate. Both aliens straightened up, hope flickering in their eyes like candles being lit in a dark room. The smaller one actually smiled. The first genuine smile David had seen from anyone in weeks. "Yes." The taller one said quickly, "Yes, we work. We work very hard. Very good workers." "What are your names?" David asked. "I'm Zara," said the taller one. "This is Kix, my friend." "All right, Zara and Kix. I'm David. Welcome to the team." As they shook hands, the Villani handshake was slightly different from the human one, with palms pressed together instead of gripped. David noticed the other humans watching with various expressions of disapproval and suspicion. He knew this decision would bring him trouble. Some people would assume the worst about his motives. Others would accuse him of helping the enemy. But as he watched Zara and Kix carefully examine his inventory, asking intelligent questions about preservation and storage, he felt something he hadn't experienced since the collapse. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was still some humanity left in this broken world after all. The first week with Zara and Kix working at the stall changed everything for David. He had expected some pushback from the other survivors, but he wasn't prepared for just how angry people would get. On the 3rd day, a burly man named Tom cornered him while the 2 aliens were organizing canned goods in the back room. "You've lost your mind, David," Tom said, his voice low but threatening. "Everyone's talking about it. You're harboring the enemy." "They're not the enemy," David replied calmly, though his heart was racing. "They're just people trying to survive, same as us." Tom laughed bitterly. "People? Those things aren't people, and everyone knows what you're really keeping them around for. 2 young alien girls living in your back room? Come on, man. We all know what's going on here." The accusation hit David like a punch to the gut. He had feared this would happen, but hearing it spoken out loud made him realize how his act of kindness looked to others. In this new world where trust was rare and suspicion was everywhere, people assumed the worst about everything. "It's not like that," David said firmly. "They work for food and shelter. That's it, nothing else." Tom shook his head and walked away, but not before saying loud enough for others to hear, "Sure it isn't. Just remember, when those things turn on you, don't come crying to the rest of us for help." David felt the weight of every stare as he walked back to his stall. Conversations stopped when he approached. People who used to greet him with nods now looked away. He was becoming an outcast in his own community, and it had only been 3 days. But when he saw Zara and Kix working diligently in the back room, carefully checking each can for dents and organizing everything by expiration date, he knew he had made the right choice. They weren't just helping him, they were saving his business. Their alien senses could detect things he couldn't. Zara could smell when meat was starting to go bad days before David would notice. Kix had incredible eyesight that let her spot potential customers or threats from blocks away. On the 5th day, something interesting happened. Old Betty, a woman who had been trading with David since the early days after the collapse, approached the stall looking nervous. She glanced around to make sure no one was watching, then leaned close to David. "I need to ask you something," she whispered. "My grandson has been sick for days. Fever. Can't keep food down. Nothing we've tried is working. I heard that. Well, I heard that the blue people know about plants and medicine that we don't." David looked back at Zara, who was carefully arranging dried fruits on the table. "Zara," he called softly, "could you come here for a minute?" When David explained the situation, Zara's eyes lit up with genuine concern. She asked Betty several questions about the boy's symptoms, her broken English improving daily from constant practice. Then she nodded thoughtfully. "In the old park, 3 blocks north," Zara said. "Growing there's plant we call healing root. Humans call it a not no word. Has purple flowers, leaves like this." She shaped her hands to show the size. "Make tea from root. Will help fever, help stomach." Betty looked skeptical, but desperate. "You're sure it's safe? My people used for many years. Very safe for human children too. I show you where to find." An hour later, David watched as Zara led Betty through the overgrown park that had once been the city's pride. Kix stayed behind to mind the stall, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble. David was amazed at how naturally the 2 aliens had integrated into his daily routine. When Zara returned, she brought something unexpected. 3 other human survivors who had heard about her plant knowledge. Word was spreading that the alien girl at David's stall knew things about edible plants and natural remedies that could save lives. Over the following days, more people began approaching the stall. Not all of them were friendly, but many were. Curious, they wanted to know what the aliens could offer besides their labor. Kix proved to have an incredible memory for faces and could recognize people from enormous distances, making her invaluable for security. She could spot troublemakers approaching long before they became a threat. But it was Zara's knowledge of plants that really changed people's minds. The collapse had destroyed the supply chains that brought food from farms to cities. Most survivors were living on canned goods and whatever they could scavenge. Fresh food was almost impossible to find, and many people were developing nutritional deficiencies that made them weak and sick. Zara knew which weeds were actually nutritious vegetables. She could identify edible flowers, roots, and berries that most humans walked past every day without realizing they were food. More importantly, she knew which plants were dangerous and should be avoided completely. David started letting her teach small groups of survivors about urban foraging. At first, people were reluctant to eat alien food, but hunger is a powerful motivator. When Betty's grandson recovered from his fever after drinking Zara's plant tea, word spread quickly through the survivor community. Not everyone was convinced. Tom and his friends continued to view the aliens with suspicion. They spread rumors that the plant knowledge was actually a trick to poison humans slowly. Some people claimed that David was being controlled by alien mind powers. The divide in the community was growing deeper every day. But for David, the choice was becoming clearer. Every morning, he watched Zara and Kix wake up early to organize his inventory and plan the day's activities. They worked harder than any employees he had ever had, even back in the old world when he paid actual wages. They never complained, never asked for more than their basic needs, and genuinely seemed to care about helping not just him, but the entire community survive. One evening, as they sat around a small fire behind the stall sharing a dinner of canned soup and foraged greens, Kix surprised David by speaking in nearly perfect English. Her language skills had been improving rapidly. "David," she said quietly, "we know that helping us makes trouble for you. If you want us to leave, we understand. We don't want to cause problems." David looked at both of them, these 2 young women who had transformed his struggling business into something resembling hope. "You're not going anywhere," he said firmly. "We're a team now. Teams stick together, no matter what anyone else thinks." For the first time since the collapse, David felt like he was building something instead of just surviving. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, he wasn't facing them alone. A month had passed since Zara and Kix started working with David, and life had settled into something that almost felt normal. The three of them had developed routines that worked like clockwork. Zara would wake up first, checking the weather, and scouting nearby areas for fresh plants. Kix would climb to the roof of their building each morning, using her incredible eyesight to scan the horizon for any approaching groups. David would prepare the stall and count inventory, planning trades for the day ahead. The community remained split about the arrangement. About half the survivors had come around to accepting the aliens, especially after seeing how Zara's plant knowledge had helped several sick people recover. The other half, led by Tom and his growing group of followers, viewed David's stall with increasing hostility. That hostility came to a head on a gray Tuesday morning when the autumn air carried the first hint of winter cold. David was arranging canned goods on his table when Kix suddenly dropped from her lookout position on the roof, landing silently beside him with the natural grace her people possessed. "David," she whispered urgently, "big group coming from the south, maybe 15 people. They have weapons." David felt his stomach drop. He had been expecting this for weeks, but that didn't make it any easier. "How long do we have?" 10 minutes, maybe less. They're moving fast." Zara appeared from the back room where she had been sorting through medical supplies. One look at their faces told her everything. "Is it Tom's group?" "Has to be," David said, his mind racing through options. They could run, but that would mean abandoning everything he had built. They could try to hide, but 15 armed people would find them easily. That left only one choice: stand and fight. "I want both of you to get in the back room and stay there," David said firmly. "Lock the door and don't come out no matter what you hear." Zara shook her head. "We don't run. We are a team. Remember, teams stick together. This isn't your fight." David protested. "They're coming for me because I helped you. I won't let you get hurt because of my choices." Kix placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "David, you saved our lives. We were ready to die that first day when we had nothing left. Everything we have now, we have because you chose kindness over fear. Let us help you." Before David could argue further, Tom's voice echoed down the empty street. "David, we know you're in there with those creatures. Time to settle this once and for all." David stepped out from behind his stall to face the approaching group. Tom walked in front, carrying a baseball bat. The others spread out behind him, forming a semicircle that blocked any escape routes. Some had makeshift weapons, crowbars, knives, pieces of rebar. All of them had the hard look of people who had convinced themselves they were doing something righteous. "Tom," David said, keeping his voice steady. "What do you want?" "You know what we want," Tom replied, stopping about 20 feet away. "Those alien freaks need to go. They're dangerous, they're unnatural, and they don't belong here. Hand them over, and we'll let you walk away from this." "They're not going anywhere," David said. "They're under my protection." Tom laughed harshly. "Your protection? Look around, David. You're outnumbered 15-1. What kind of protection can you offer?" "The kind that comes from doing what's right," David replied. "These people have never hurt anyone. They work hard, they help the community, and they've probably saved more lives with their plant knowledge than any of us." "They're not people," one of Tom's followers shouted. "They're aliens, invaders. They came in peace 5 years ago," David said. "They've done nothing but try to help us learn and grow. The collapse wasn't their fault, and you know it." Tom raised his bat. "Last chance, David. Step aside." That's when something unexpected happened. Zara and Kix emerged from the back room, moving to stand on either side of David. But they weren't alone. Behind them came old Betty, walking slowly but with determination. Then came the young father whose daughter Zara had helped recover from a plant poisoning. Then the elderly man whose arthritis pain had been eased by one of Kix's herbal remedies. One by one, other survivors appeared from doorways and side streets. Some David recognized as regular customers, others were people he barely knew. But all of them had been helped in some way by the two aliens he had chosen to protect. "You want to get to them," Betty said in her cracked voice. "You'll have to go through all of us." Tom looked around nervously as more people continued to arrive. His group of 15 was now facing nearly 30 survivors, many of whom were armed with their own makeshift weapons. "This is insane," Tom muttered. "They're aliens. They're not even human, neither is kindness," said a voice from the crowd. But that doesn't make it less valuable. For a moment, everything balanced on a knife's edge. Tom's group was still dangerous, and David could see the anger in their eyes. But they were also outnumbered and surrounded by people who had made their choice clear. Then Tom made his decision. With a roar of rage, he charged forward, swinging his bat directly at Zara's head. David moved to intercept, but he was too slow. The bat was going to connect, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. That's when Zara did something that shocked everyone, including David. Instead of running or cowering, she raised her hands and released a burst of brilliant blue energy. The electrical discharge hit Tom's bat, traveled up the metal, and sent him flying backward to land hard on the cracked asphalt. The street went completely silent. Tom groaned and rolled over, his hair smoking slightly but otherwise unharmed. His followers stared in amazement and fear at what they had just witnessed. "She could have killed him," someone whispered, but she held back. Zara was breathing heavily, her skin glowing faintly with residual energy. "My people have this ability," she said to the crowd. "We never told you because we feared you would think us dangerous. But I would never use it to hurt someone who did. Not threaten my family first." David stared at her in amazement, not because of the power she had displayed, but because of what she had called them, family. Tom struggled to his feet, his face pale, but his eyes still filled with hate. But when he looked around at the faces surrounding him, he seemed to realize that his moment had passed. The community had chosen sides, and his side had lost. "This isn't over," he said. But his voice lacked conviction. "Yes, it is," David replied firmly. "It's over, Tom. Go home." As Tom's group slowly dispersed, the other survivors began to approach. Zara and Kix with a mixture of curiosity and newfound respect. The secret was out now. The aliens had abilities beyond what anyone had imagined. But instead of making people more afraid, seeing Zara use her power to defend rather than attack had actually made them trust her more. That evening, as David sat with Zara and Kix around their small fire, he realized that everything had changed. Again, they were no longer just three survivors working together out of necessity. They had become something stronger, a real family, forged in the crucible of a world that had tried to tear them apart. 2 weeks after the confrontation with Tom's group, life in the survivor community had found a new balance. People no longer whispered when they saw Zara and Kix walking through the streets. Children who had once hidden behind their parents now waved at the two aliens from doorways. The secret about their electrical abilities had spread quickly, but instead of creating fear, it had brought respect. Everyone knew that Zara could have seriously hurt Tom that day, but she had chosen mercy. Instead, David felt proud of how far they had all come. But he also sensed that bigger challenges were approaching. The weather was getting colder each day, and winter was still months away. Food was becoming harder to find, even with Zara's knowledge of edible plants. Many of the wild vegetables and fruits she had been harvesting were dying off as temperatures dropped. The real problem became clear during their weekly inventory count. David stared at the numbers in his notebook, running the calculations over and over, hoping he had made a mistake. But the math was brutal and unavoidable. "We're going to run out," he told Zara and Kix that evening as they sat around their fire. "At our current rate of consumption and trade, we'll be completely out of food in 6 weeks, maybe 7 if we start rationing severely." Kix looked up from the plant samples she had been studying. "What about the other trading posts? Surely they have supplies." David shook his head. "I've been talking to them. Everyone's in the same situation. The canned goods from the stores are finally running out. The people who knew how to preserve food for winter are mostly gone. We're all living on borrowed time." The three of them sat in silence for a moment, watching the fire crackle and pop. Finally, Zara spoke up. "There might be another way," she said quietly, "but you won't like it." "Tell me," David said. "In the alien district, where most of my people lived before the collapse, there are emergency food stores. hidden supplies that were meant to last for years. But she hesitated. But what? David pressed. But Tom and his followers have been spreading rumors that any humans who go into the alien district will be attacked. They say it's dangerous, that the aliens there have turned savage. Most humans are too afraid to even approach the area. Kix nodded sadly. My people are afraid too. They think all humans want to hurt them after what happened to some of the other refugees. Both sides are scared of each other. David felt a spark of hope mixed with concern. How much food are we talking about? Enough to feed this entire community through winter, Zara replied. But getting it won't be easy. My people don't trust humans anymore. And they definitely won't trust a human who shows up with armed guards. It would have to be someone they believe truly cares about both species surviving together. The implication was clear. David would have to go into the alien district himself, probably alone, and somehow convince a group of frightened, suspicious aliens to share their emergency supplies with the human community that had rejected them. When do we leave? David asked. We? Zara looked surprised. David, this is incredibly dangerous. If my people think you're there to steal from them, or if Tom's group finds out where you've gone, I'm not doing this alone, David said firmly. We're a team, remember. Besides, I'll need translators. And Kix's ability to spot danger from a distance could save all our lives. 3 days later, they set out before dawn. David carried a backpack filled with trade goods, medical supplies, tools, and some of their precious remaining food as a gesture of good faith. Zara and Kix walked beside him, both visibly nervous about returning to their old neighborhood. The alien district was only 2 miles from David's stall, but it felt like entering a different world. The buildings here were older, many of them converted warehouses and apartments that had housed the alien refugees. Now they looked abandoned, with broken windows and doors hanging open like empty mouths. But Kix's sharp eyes caught details that David missed. They're watching us, she whispered. At least a dozen hidden observers. They know we're here. They walked deeper into the district, following Zara's directions toward the community center where the emergency supplies were stored. The silence was eerie. No voices, no movement, just the sound of their footsteps echoing off empty buildings. Then, without warning, they were surrounded. Aliens emerged from doorways and alleys, moving with the same silent grace that Kix possessed. They were thin, clearly undernourished, but their eyes held the desperate determination of people protecting their last hope of survival. An older male stepped forward, his blue skin marked with intricate tattoos that David had learned indicated high status among the Villani. He spoke rapidly in their language, his tone accusatory. Zara responded, her voice calm but firm. The conversation went on for several minutes, with other aliens occasionally joining in. David caught a few words he recognized, his own name, references to food and winter, and what sounded like arguments about trust. Finally, Zara turned to David. This is Eldervin. He leads what's left of our community here. He says that humans have been throwing rocks at their buildings and shouting threats. 3 of their people were beaten badly last week when they tried to forage for food outside the district. David felt sick. He had known there was tension, but he hadn't realized how bad things had gotten. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him that not all humans feel that way, Zara translated. And Eldervin responded with what sounded like skepticism. He says words are easy, Zara continued. He wants to know what you're willing to do, not what you're willing to say. David thought for a moment, then pulled out his notebook, the one where he tracked all his trades and inventory. He tore out a clean page and began writing quickly. Tell him this, David said, handing the paper to Zara. I'm proposing a formal alliance between the human survivor community and the alien district. Shared resources, shared protection, shared knowledge. My people get access to the emergency food supplies and alien expertise about preservation and foraging. Your people get access to our medical supplies, tools, and protection from Tom's group. As Zara translated the proposal, David could see the other aliens beginning to whisper among themselves. Some looked hopeful. Others remained suspicious. Eldervin asked several pointed questions, which Zara translated. What guarantee was there that the humans wouldn't just take the food and leave? How could they trust that David spoke for the entire human community? What would happen when resources became scarce again? David answered each question honestly, acknowledging the risks while emphasizing the alternative. Both groups slowly starving to death while refusing to help each other. The discussion continued for nearly an hour. More aliens appeared, drawn by the commotion. David noticed that many of them were elderly or very young, the most vulnerable members of their society. Just like in the human community, the strongest had either died in the collapse or left to find better opportunities elsewhere. Finally, Eldervin made his decision. He spoke directly to David in heavily accented but clear English. "We will try," he said. "But if humans betray trust, if they take food and give nothing back, alliance ends." "You understand?" David nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I promise you, Eldervin, that won't happen. We're stronger together than apart." As they shook hands, David carefully mimicking the Villani gesture of pressed palms, he realized that he had just committed himself and his community to something that would either save them all or destroy everything he had built. Walking back through the alien district with Zara and Kix, now accompanied by several Villani volunteers who would help transport the first batch of supplies, David felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Tomorrow, he would have to convince his own people to accept this alliance. Some would be grateful. Others, especially Tom's remaining followers, would see it as betrayal. But as he watched human and alien survivors working together to carry food that would keep both communities alive through the coming winter, David knew he had made the right choice. Sometimes survival meant taking risks that scared you. Sometimes it meant trusting people who looked different from you. And sometimes it meant believing that cooperation could overcome fear. The meeting David called for the next evening was the largest gathering the human survivor community had seen since the collapse. Nearly every adult showed up, cramming into the old library that served as their unofficial town hall. The air was thick with tension and the smell of too many unwashed bodies in one space. David stood at the front of the room, flanked by Zara and Kix behind them. Eldervin and 3 other alien representatives waited quietly, their glowing eyes reflecting the candle light that illuminated the room. Some humans stared at them with curiosity, others with barely concealed hostility. "You all know why we're here," David began, his voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "Winter is coming fast, and we're running out of food. In 6 weeks, maybe 7, our supplies will be gone completely." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People had suspected things were bad, but hearing it stated so bluntly made the reality hit home. "But there's hope," David continued. "The alien community has emergency food stores that could keep all of us alive through winter. In exchange, they want our protection, our medical supplies, and our help building a stronger community for everyone." Tom stood up from near the back of the room, his face red with anger. "So now we're supposed to beg the aliens for scraps? These creatures caused our problems in the first place." "No, they didn't," David replied firmly. "The electromagnetic pulse that destroyed our technology had nothing to do with the Villani. They're victims of the collapse just like us. That's what they want you to think," Tom shot back. "This is all part of their plan. First they make us dependent on them. Then they take over completely." Eldervin stepped forward, speaking slowly in his careful English. "If we wanted to take over, why will we hide in broken buildings while our children starve? Why will we offer to share our last food with people who throw stones at us?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Many people looked ashamed, remembering their own participation in the harassment of alien refugees. Old Betty struggled to her feet, leaning heavily on her walking stick. "My grandson was dying of fever until Zara showed me which plants could heal him. These people saved his life when none of us knew how to help him. My daughter was poisoned eating berries she found in the park," added another voice. "Kix knew exactly what to do. She spent 3 days nursing my little girl back to health." Asking for nothing in return, more voices joined in, sharing stories of how the aliens had helped them. David watched Tom's face grow darker with each testimony. But he also noticed that many of Tom's former supporters were looking uncertain now. "This is all very touching," Tom said bitterly. "But what happens when their food runs out too? What happens when there's not enough for everyone? You think they'll choose human children over their own?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. David realized this was the moment that would determine everything. He took a deep breath and made a decision that surprised even himself. "Tom's right to worry about that," David said. "Resource scarcity is going to be a problem no matter what we do. But I've seen how Zara and Kix handled difficult choices. When they were starving and desperate, they didn't steal or hurt anyone. They came to me asking for honest work. When Tom attacked them, they could have seriously hurt him, but they chose mercy instead." He paused, looking round the room at faces lit by flickering candles. "I've learned something important these past few months. Character isn't what you do when times are good. Character is what you do when you're scared, hungry, and desperate. And from what I've seen, the Villani have better character than most humans I know." Tom's face twisted with rage. "You're a traitor to your own species." "No," David said quietly. "I'm trying to save my species. All of our species. Together." What happened next would be talked about for years to come. Eldervin walked slowly to the center of the room, his aged hands shaking slightly. He reached into his robes and pulled out a small, intricately carved wooden box. "This contains seeds," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the silent room. "Seeds from my home world, brought on the ships that carried my people to Earth. We have kept them safe for 5 years, hoping someday to plant them and grow food that could feed both our peoples." He opened the box, revealing dozens of small, pearl-like seeds that seemed to glow with their own inner light. "These plants grow fast, need little water, and can survive in cold weather. One seed can produce enough food to feed a family for a week. We have been afraid to plant them because we feared humans would steal our crops and leave us with nothing." The room was completely silent now, everyone staring at the miraculous seeds. "But today," Eldervin continued, "I choose to trust. If we work together, if we share knowledge and resources, these seeds could end hunger for both our peoples. Not just for this winter, but for many winters to come." He held out the box toward the human crowd. "But they must be planted by human and Villani hands working together. They will not grow if planted in soil watered by hatred and fear." David felt tears running down his cheeks. Round the room, he could see similar expressions of amazement and hope on faces that had been marked by months of despair. Tom made one last desperate attempt to maintain control. "Don't listen to them. This is obviously some kind of trick." But his voice was drowned out by the sound of people rising to their feet, moving forward to get a closer look at the seeds that could save them all. Even some of Tom's former followers pushed past him, their curiosity overcoming their prejudice. The alliance was formalized that night with handshakes and promises. But the real work began the next morning. Human and alien work crews started, moving supplies between the two districts. Children who had never seen each other began playing together in the streets. Elderly humans shared stories with elderly Villani, discovering that grief and hope sounded the same in any language. David's small trading stall evolved into something much larger, a coordination center where humans and aliens could find work, trade resources, and solve problems together. Zara became his official partner, her plant knowledge now being taught to mixed classes of human and alien students. Kix used her remarkable eyesight to establish an early warning system that protected both communities from raiders and dangers. Winter came early that year, bringing snowfall that would have meant starvation and death for both groups if they had remained separated. But working together, sharing resources and knowledge, they not only survived but thrived. The alien seeds, planted in carefully tended greenhouse spaces, produced food that was more nutritious and flavorful than anything most humans had ever tasted. By spring, the integrated community had grown to include survivors from hundreds of miles away, all drawn by stories of a place where different species had learned to live and work together in harmony. Tom and a few die-hard followers had left months earlier, still convinced that cooperation was weakness, but most people had embraced the new reality. David often stood at his old stall location, now expanded into a proper marketplace where dozens of human and alien vendors sold everything from alien vegetables to human crafts. He would watch Zara teaching a group of mixed-species children about edible plants, while Kix helped organize the community's defense patrols. They had all come so far from that desperate evening when the starving aliens had offered everything they had just for a chance to survive. Now they were building something that was stronger than what had existed before the collapse. A community based not on fear and scarcity, but on trust, cooperation, and the simple recognition that survival was easier when everyone worked together. The world had ended on a Tuesday morning, but it had been reborn through the simple act of choosing kindness over fear, cooperation over competition, and hope over despair.